Good evening, everyone. I'm Gina Brown, and I would like to welcome you to the 2015 Provincial Candidate Debate for the Gander District. Tonight is going to be a great evening. It's going to be enlightening, and we hope that by the end of it, you'll have a better idea of who you would like to vote for come Election Day on November the 30th. Tonight's debate is possible through partnership with the Gander Area Chamber of Commerce as well as Rogers TV. And I would like to introduce the two gentlemen who are vying for your vote and currently running for the Gander District. For the Liberal Party, John Haggie, and for the NDP Party, Lukas Norman. And before we get started, I would like to wish you both good luck on tonight's debate. And now I would like to introduce you to the moderator for this evening, the second vice chair for the Gander Area Chamber of Commerce, Debbie Yannikides.
I take this opportunity to wish each of you the best of luck tonight and throughout the campaign. It's now my pleasure to introduce our three panelists, Gina Brown of Rogers TV, Darren Murray, Chamber Director, Rod French, Chamber Director. Sitting next to me is our timekeeper, Kevin Higgins, who's the first Vice Chair of the Chamber. Kevin's been assigned the difficult task of keeping us all on time. The role of the timekeeper is to keep the candidates on track. As you'll notice, there's a box in front of Kevin with three not-so-large lights. Green will indicate the start of the candidate's response. White will indicate 20 seconds remaining and time to wrap up, and red will indicate time up, at which time the candidate will stop speaking. I ask that each of the candidates pay close attention to the lights and abide by the rules. The rules for the forum are very simple. Each candidate will have a 2-minute opening remarks. There will be a total of 12 questions from the panelists, 6 questions per candidate. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to respond to the questions directed to them. The other candidate will have 1 minute for reaction, followed by 2 minutes of open debate. 6 questions from the floor will be on a draw basis. Members of the audience wishing to pose questions to the candidates are asked to submit their names to Kendra. Once the name is drawn, the individual is asked to proceed to the area of the microphone as quickly as possible. To maximize the number of audience questions, audience members are asked to keep their questions brief and to a maximum of 1 minute. The candidate the question is directed to will have 2 minutes to respond to the question, and the other candidate will have 1 minute for reaction, followed by 2 minutes of open debate. 2 one-on-one debates whereby the questioning candidate has 30 seconds to ask the question. The responding candidate has 1 minute for response, followed by 2 minutes of open debate. John Haggie to Lukas Norman, Lukas Norman to John Haggie. Candidates will have 2 minutes for the closing remarks. Thank you for your attention, and we wish you a very interesting and informative evening. The candidate's seating arrangement has been determined alphabetically, and we'll start with John Haggie for the Liberal Party. Mr. Haggie.
Thank you. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event and for you to taking the time to come here tonight or watch from home. I would also like to acknowledge my colleague on the podium here with me. We may be only 2, but I'm certain you'll find the evening full and informative. For the last 15 years, I've worked hard lobbying for change to improve health and healthcare in the province. Frankly, I've become very frustrated at the lack of progress. I also found others working in education, in social programs, and the public sector who were similarly frustrated. It's clear that after 12 years of Conservative government, we're at a critical juncture, and it's crucial for us to get our province back on track. After many conversations, I decided to run for office here, my family's home for the last 19 years. I believe my unique perspective will provide fresh ways to help with the changes we all know are needed. The Liberal 5-point plan is rolling out, with 3 of the 5 planks already released. In the coming days, we'll release a fully costed Liberal election platform. There is a plan for transforming the way government works, to open up government, making it both more responsive and transparent. We have a comprehensive plan to strengthen our economy. Yet to come is that complete costing for sustaining our communities, along with plans to revitalize education at all levels. It is a prescription for a stronger tomorrow, one that starts right here in the Gander District with you. You will have heard speakers trying to tell you what this election is about. Quite simply, this election is about who the voters in this district want to be their next representative in the House of Assembly. It's about character and approach. I have spent the summer meeting with representatives across the district here, and I can sense the optimism that comes with the promise of change. I've listened to their concerns, and those will become my concerns to bring to the House of Assembly. So I look forward to tonight, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Haggie. Mr. Norman?
Like my colleague over here, John, I want to thank everybody for coming out here tonight. It's so wonderful. Even the Liberals there, I'm glad you guys are here too. I want everybody involved in this process. It's so important to me. I felt for too long that we haven't been engaged as a community in terms of being involved with the political process. And, that's no longer acceptable, and that's one of the things that I'm hoping to change. I want to thank our panelists here. I would like to thank our moderator and the Chamber for hosting this event, and I'd like to thank Rogers Cable. For me, as many of you know, I am 22 years old. I was born and raised in Gander. My family has deep roots in Newfoundland and Labrador, and I very much care deeply about this place. In 2011, as many of you may know, I also ran as a candidate. I put my name on the ballot. I felt it was important for the choice to be there. But since then, I became the vice president of the NDP in Newfoundland and Labrador. I know I have an in-depth knowledge of the policies that affect us as day-to-day citizens in the province. I'm very concerned about what's happening in Newfoundland and Labrador, and that's why I put my name forward here today. I have a post-secondary education in international politics and business. I spent time abroad in Europe with international organizations like NATO, the OECD, and the United Nations, learning about developing democracies around the world and the policies that have worked for other countries. I think that experience bringing to the provincial legislature, either as a member of the House of Assembly and as an individual, would thoroughly benefit the people of Newfoundland and Labrador and Gander District. There's been a huge barrier involved with getting people involved with the political process in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's no longer acceptable. I'm working very hard to get out and talk to as many people as possible and engage them in this process. We haven't voted governments in Newfoundland and Labrador in 66 years. We vote them out. That's indicative by the fact that there's no PC candidate here tonight. I don't think that's acceptable. I'm very, very concerned about that, as all of you should be as well. Hopefully, by the end of this evening, I can convince you that I am the man for the job, I'm the person for the job, and you'll want me in the House of Assembly as the member for Gander. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Norman. At this time, we'll proceed with questions from the panelists. We'll now start with questions with Mr. Haggie, followed by Mr. Norman. Each candidate will be asked 4 questions prior to the break with 2 minutes to respond, and the other candidate will have 1 minute for reaction, followed by 2 minutes open debate. Our first question is Darren to John.
John, a $15.3 million contract was awarded on October the 30th for the construction of a new grades 4 to 6 school in Gander. It is said the school will accommodate up to 450 students. Considering the current Gander Academy is over capacity with close to 1,000 students, and with the 2016 implementation of full-day kindergarten and the potential growth in Gander, there is a concern that the 450 accommodation will not meet future enrollment needs. How would your party address this concern?
The whole issue of education has been one of the pillars of the Liberal platform. The essence of it is that there will be a Premier's task force on education. The problem with the school in this district particularly has been twofold. One is where the thing has been put. There was some debate about whether or not that should have gone there in the first place. Having done that and broken ground, the next problem is that particular school and the design of it is different. It's a 2-story building for a school, which is most unusual in current education thinking. So I think, though as the contract has been awarded, it's obvious that there is going to be an infrastructure deficit here. There are other spaces in the town which I think are going to need to be examined, but it's important not to do this in a piecemeal fashion and to do it as part of a structured approach. And that's what the Liberal platform on education will unveil. The specifics of this school, I think, are also impacted by the fact that there's next to it a wastewater treatment system, which is sadly in need of renovating. And I'm not even sure that there isn't a public health hazard in putting children in that new building until that's sorted out. So that's another infrastructure debt. And there are some challenges there, but there are also some opportunities, given the fact that there is a significant pot of federal money now being made available under promises from the newly coming federal Liberal government, which I think we as a district would be in a position to access. So I think that the short answer is there's a lot of contingencies around that school that haven't been answered, and I don't know any more detail than that because it isn't possible to access it.
Thank you, John.
Well, the fact that, as John had just mentioned, there's a lot of contingencies surrounding that school is right there why I should be in the House of Assembly. You're going to need me in there to ask these questions to make sure the needs of the district are being met. I will stand up to my own party. I'll stand up to the Liberal Party. I'll stand up to the Progressive Conservative Party. Whoever's in there to make sure that the needs of this district are being met. I have some serious concerns about that school design as well. I mean, there's a residential or a commercial kitchen being put in there, but there's no space currently for a computer lab. What about learning in the 21st century? I mean, that's a big concern of mine as well. And as John also mentioned, the sewage facility down there, I mean, that hasn't been entirely dealt with yet. The tender was awarded way too late for that school. It's not acceptable. I'm very upset about it, as should many people in that district be. And furthermore, full-day kindergarten's coming in now next year, as was previously mentioned. The space is not at Gander Academy, and the new school's not going to be ready in time. Are we going to build more portables on the back of the Gander Academy? Why haven't we talked about this yet? I'm really concerned about it.
Thank you, Lucas. We now have 2 minutes open debate.
Well, I would just take issue with the premise that you're the only person who can actually ask questions in a public arena about a policy that was instituted by a previous Conservative government. I think that's a little one-sided. The job that I'm running for is to be a representative of this district, not a member of a government. I suspect that if I'm successful, the governing party will be the Liberal Party. But the facts of the case is it doesn't stop me from asking questions, and certainly will not stop me from holding, for want of a better word, a clinic, but this time a constituency clinic, one where you can keep your clothes on and there's no rubber gloves. But people will be able to come and talk to me as constituents in this district. And really and honestly, I think it's a bit unfortunate that you think that you're the only one who'll be able to ask questions.
I don't think that I'm the only one that's going to be able to ask a question, but my commitment was to the people of the district that I would be available, as I hope you would be as well. It's very important to have on the boots on the ground representation in the district. It's very important to everybody here, and that's what I'm committed to doing, and I'm glad that you're going to be doing the same as well.
I think the facts of the case are, as regards the school itself, we being the previous government maybe, as a province, we've never used the expertise of people on the ground when making decisions. It's been for the last 12 years, it's been a very high-handed way of looking at things. And one of the other planks of the Liberal platform is to open the whole process up to transparency and involvement.
Absolutely. I'm 100% in there. I believe transparency should be at the forefront of all these processes. I mean, we're awarding contracts worth millions and millions of dollars, so it's very, very important that the discourse is open to the public. And, you know, I'm very, very glad to hear, as I suspected, that you would be representing people the same way that I would be.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is Gina DeLucas.
Lucas, over the past years, the province has become very dependent on new non-renewable resources when we have very valuable renewable resources right here in our backyard. Tourism. What would you do to support the growth of tourism industry in the province, especially in our area?
Thank you, Gina, for that question. Tourism is a multi-million-dollar industry in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's one that I believe that hasn't been taken advantage of in Newfoundland and Labrador, and you know that's also a concern of mine as well. The Gander District houses a very famous international airport that we all hold dearly. It's very important to all of us. I think we've had several missed opportunities in the area of marketing what we have to offer. I mean, Gander Lake is one of the deepest lakes in the world. The Fogo Island Inn, for that matter. If you want to go to the Fogo Island Inn, you have to fly into Gander if you're coming from elsewhere. So it's about partnering with local businesses, and I've met with local business leaders who have worked with Zita Cobb and the Shorefast Foundation to provide a smooth transition from flying into Gander to getting to Fogo Island. I'm very impressed with what's been happening on Fogo Island in terms of the social entrepreneurship. I think we need to capitalize on a lot more of that here in the area. It's very important to me, and it's been very important to the people that I've spoken to with regards to tourism in the area.
There are 120 cabins on the Gander River between the lake and the ocean. 20 of those are VIP places where people will pay significant amount of money for a holiday experience. They buy licenses as part of that, but 75% of them are successful. The other 25% will still come back if you provide them with a good experience. This community here, in terms of Glenwood, is a staging post. You can see the investment that people have made in their own money in terms of putting in small wharves and access points to the river for riverboats. I think the Liberal Party has been very clear that the whole concept of marketing of tourism has been utterly inadequate thus far. We've had some really nice adverts, but that's been as far as it's gone. And this is, as you say, certainly a renewable, sustainable resource for the future and must be supported.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes.
To what John said, he mentioned about the cabins and such. I think what that, in a light of, I think what a lot of that has to do with is partnering with local stakeholders in the community. That includes small and medium-sized businesses. They create a ton of jobs in the area. And if we had, the proper infrastructure in place from the tourism department, we could ensure that anyone that's interested in creating a new endeavor in the area, a new entrepreneurial endeavor to draw people to the area. I mean, all the flat land in central Newfoundland for skidooing and snowmobiling in the winter, I think that will go a long way. And it's a missed opportunity right now, and it's something that we really need to capitalize on.
It's interesting that you talked about small and medium businesses. The NDP policies have made very little reference to how to sustain or help small and medium businesses or to develop an entrepreneurial approach. The Liberal economic platform has 47 points in it, 12 of which deal with helping out small businesses. You're talking to groups which, for example, your party's plan for putting $1 on a minimum wage instantly is going to produce significant hardships. And that has been done arbitrarily. It's not been done in a way that's been discussed with any of the stakeholders. So to say that your party has had an interest in stakeholders and wants to come and talk and work with medium and small businesses is saying one thing, but not putting your actions where your mouth is. So I take issue with that.
Well, directly to that, I want to make a point that the small business tax in Newfoundland and Labrador was reduced by 75%. This was something that the NDP had been advocating for years. We saw that in the 2014 budget. And as for the minimum wage, right now we haven't seen an increase in the minimum wage in 5 years. We went from having one of the top in the country to the lowest. Right now, if you're making minimum wage in Newfoundland and Labrador, you're living below the poverty line. I don't care what you're doing. If you're working full-time, you shouldn't be living in poverty. And I think the more money in people's pockets they can spend on local goods and services to help businesses thrive.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question is Rod to John.
Thank you. John, switching gears on a different economic sector, Gander is well known as a center of aerospace. Given the number of businesses providing services and products to the aerospace industry and their contribution to the economy of the area, what would you do to ensure that this industry continues to grow?
This is a huge area, I think, with marvelous potential. We have, on the one hand, we have a maintenance training organization. We have a flight training organization. We have a business that can sign off apprentices. We have capabilities at composites, which are only just being scratched. They're now moved into non-destructive testing of components that are brought in from outside. The problem at the moment is getting these individual groups to actually work together. It's almost like between the paperwork and the administration and the bureaucracy, there's sand in the machine. I would see the role of the local MHA being very much as removing that sand, washing it out, and being the oil in the cogs that makes that go round. We have potential here for enormous growth. We have one of Air Canada's only 4 premium connector services. We have the only company in North America, apart from Beach, who make the aircraft, that can actually retrofit, modify, and fit certified interior components to the Beach. We need to be bringing that stuff to everyone's attention. We need to then go out and we need to go to these companies and say, we have facilities here. We need infrastructure investment at the airport as well, because another piece of the puzzle was the previous government's unfulfilled undertaking to sign a lease at the airport for Government Air Services hangar. That was supposed to be inked in June. No one's gone anywhere near it. My priority for the airport would be to make sure those things start to move in the right direction.
Thank you, John. Lukas?
Yeah, the aerospace industry is obviously the reason why we're all here tonight. I mean, that is why Gander was put here in the first place. And as John said, I completely agree that the local MHA needs to remove any bit of friction there and be available at the beck and call of local businesses, the town council, the member of parliament, any people that can have an impact on making sure that that industry is thriving. It's very, very important. And like you said, we have a world-class flight school. I'm so proud of having the airport here in Gander. And to be honest, I would like to learn more about what local businesses are doing in partnership with the airport to make sure that we can ensure that it thrives and continues to thrive into the future.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes of open debate.
Well, the other facet of the airport, which I think is a hidden gem and I only recently discovered, is actually the Fire Protection Center in Hangar 21. And, I went in there and I was actually worried whether I was going to get out because that building looked as though it was going to fall down. And again, that's another infrastructure issue. There have been multiple opportunities over the years to invest in that, and I think they've been missed. It services, maintains, and supplies firefighting equipment to BC, Mexico, and California. And how many people know that that's actually staffed by 5 people in the winter who get it ready for the summer? There's an enormous infrastructure there, and yet they're in the back of a cold hangar with the roof coming down around the rears, which isn't heated. And really and honestly, that infrastructure investment needs to be fought for, and there's money out there to get it. The federal government have $128 million earmarked for this province for investment, and those are leverage dollars. We would have to supply, the province of Newfoundland and Labrador would have to supply $1 for every 2 you get from the feds. But the airport would be one of the places to look at from a commercial point of view as a genesis for new things. But again, it's easy to get distracted by that if you're talking about infrastructure money, because Gambo's wastewater is a disgrace. That wouldn't cost a lot of money. That's shovel-ready too. Gander has the aforementioned smell on Rousel, which is there regardless of whether it's summer or not. So I think there's a lot of opportunities around the airport, and it's a huge economic footprint for the community.
Very much concerned. I think a lot of what John had to say is that the point is there is money out there. We spent $6.6 million on Gull Island this year alone. We don't even have the customer base for Muskrat Falls. In Judy Manning's district that she's running in, they spent $4.5 million on a new pool. Money's there. It's about priorities.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is Darren to Lukas.
Lukas, rural Newfoundland has experienced a centralization of government services to the Northeast Avalon, therefore forcing our young people and families to move out of rural Newfoundland to obtain employment. What measures would your party take to ensure government services are returned back to this area?
Well, it's not just the centralization of government services that have been taken from the area. The fact is, last year, the Liberal Party and the Progressive Conservative Party met in the Confederation building and decided they were going to take 8 seats out of rural Newfoundland and Labrador. The way that legislation was written is that they had to come from the island portion of the province, because Labrador was going to keep its 4 seats due to the vast natural resources and geographic landmass that's up there, and St. John's had the population base. So the seats really did come from the island portion of the province. In the case of this district, we saw that Gambo was added to the Gander District, and I'm very delighted for that. My family's from Gambo. I love that community. But the question is still, what are we going to do about the fact that we're ripping the guts out of rural Newfoundland and Labrador, and in a lot of cases shoving it on the Avalon Peninsula? It's not acceptable. And my favorite example, because it's the least favorite thing that happened in 2013 to me, was when the school board was amalgamated and we lost 100 jobs in this community. The economic spin-offs from that are absolutely devastating for local businesses. Very concerned about that. I spoke out in vehement opposition at the time to it, and as your MHA, I will continue to press on that and see what we can do about how we can mitigate the damage that was done there. It's a very, very big concern of mine. This is not the province of the Avalon Peninsula. It's the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, and centralizing services in St. John's is not the answer.
I think from a point of view of centralizing services, there are some economies of scale to be gained by doing that, but there's a geographical bias. Whenever you look at cabinet decisions, they have to be put through an environmental filter. There's an environmental impact analysis that has to be done. I would suggest that we need to consider, for things like this, a geographical impact analysis. There is absolutely no reason in the technology era that we're in at the moment why you can't have centralized payroll services for a school board if you believe that one is the right number. And again, I would argue that too. But they could be situated in Gander or Grand Falls, anywhere on that fibre. If you're looking at central purchasing for healthcare, which has been talked about, for routine supplies, why not put it in Port aux Basques? That's where the boat comes in. But the bottom line is that there is a lot that could be done on a very practical level to do that, which is going to be very difficult for someone to do from opposition, quite frankly.
Thank you, John. We have 2 minutes for debate.
Well, on that note of having a member from the opposition, I believe if the polls are to be correct and we're heading for a landslide Liberal majority, as one of the few opposition members, I'll have more influence than a cabinet minister when it comes to getting things done for this area, and I won't be afraid to use my voice to do that and get the attention that we need.
That seems really odd to me, and maybe my brain is just seizing up as I get old, but I cannot see how being in a minority and running to come second, it actually profits anybody. Gander traditionally has been at what they call a bellwether district. It has voted in a member of the governing party. That goes back a long time. Not taking anything for granted, but the bottom line is that I'm in it to win it, not to come second.
I'm in it to win it as well for the people of this riding, to provide them representation like they've never had before. In 1996, Yvonne Jones lost the Liberal nomination for Cartwright-Lancy-Clare, and she ran as an independent and won. Cartwright-Lancy-Clare didn't go without, and when she finally did join the Liberal caucus and she became the Minister of Fisheries, in 2003, when Danny Williams swept the power, she was still there. I'm aware she's a Liberal member, but the way she served her district is admirable, and it's the kind of representation I want to provide here.
I think if you're looking at representation, we're probably arguing from the same song sheet. The facts of the case are, in terms of where you go with government, we've heard criticisms about how the House has been reshaped by the legislation. The bottom line is that the House is still way from functioning in any way like a representative or democratic government. There's no legislative review committees. There's no adequate committee structure. The House has met at the whim of Mr. Davis or Ms. Dunderdale when she felt like it. The Liberal Party has very clear outlines as to how that House would be reformed. It would sit on a business-like basis. It would have committees do a lot of its work, and these would be all-party committees, and you would have a proper legislative review approach. I haven't seen anything like that from my colleague's party.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is Gina to John.
John, in recent years, there has been an increasing awareness of teenage mental health issues, in particular with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and suicide. Access to mental health services is particularly difficult in rural areas. What is your plan to address this issue?
You're perfectly right. There is an awful issue with healthcare access in rural areas, and it's particularly difficult for mental health. And you can't really have physical health without mental health. To try and separate the two, I understand why people are doing it at the moment, because mental health is on catch-up, but the bottom line is you can't have one without the other. There are several things that can be done. On a very practical basis, I would go to Central Health and ask them why they haven't appointed the vacancies in the psychology department, the vacancies in social work, the vacancies in pediatric psychology that are there and have never been filled. And I don't know why that has happened. On a more systemic approach, we really need to have a proper mental health system in this province. It doesn't have to be done in person all the time. There are technologies such as telehealth, which is underused, whereby healthcare providers can actually deal with clients, I think is the fashionable phrase at the moment in mental health, from afar. So you can have services that are clustered like a hub and spoke. That's never been expanded properly. We have telehealth equipment at James Payton Memorial Hospital, which is idle for 8 hours of the day. I do not know why, and I could never get an answer from within the system. And that's one of the reasons that I want to step outside the system and actually, on your behalf, go to St. John's and ask the people in the Department of Health why it is that Central Health, particularly in Gander, has not been treated the same way as other districts.
Thank you, John. Lucas?
Well, I just want to go back to something that we talked about in the last segment really quickly, because it does segue into this about opposition members. The NDP opposition members in the House of Assembly have accomplished quite a bit with their small but mighty caucus. Jerry Rogers was railing on mental health for years, and after the work she did, born from that was the Community Coalition for Mental Health, and then ultimately the other two parties agreed to form an all-party committee on mental health. It's a very big concern. I spoke with a woman on the door the other day who was very upset about the fact that the Brown Center in Grand Falls offered a lot of services that weren't available here in Gander. You know, these are all kinds of questions that we need to be asking ourselves as a community and in the bureaucracy as well, how we can mitigate some of this and make it more efficient for the people that live here, and that's what I'm really committed to doing. As for mental health, the Liberal Party has committed to replacing the Waterford Hospital, but they have yet to cost it or tell us how they're going to pay for it. That's a concern of mine as well.
The Liberal Party has committed with a time schedule to replace the Waterford Hospital. It is being costed, and as they say, watch this space for later on this week. Those figures are there. The other thing about the Waterford Hospital is the approach that's needed, and the approach I have heard from within Dwight's caucus is that it's the people you put in the building and the processes you put in place in that building that will act as a foundation for a service that runs across the island and into Labrador too. We need to have more emphasis on mental health generally across this district, and Gander has been severely disadvantaged from psychology, social work, and psychiatry services for the 20 years I've been there. I have not been able to get an answer, but I know who I can ask after the 30th of November.
I know who I can ask too, and that'll be the Premier of the province to make sure the Minister of Health is taking care of these issues that need to be dealt with. They're systemic, they're far-reaching, and until we start dealing with the root causes of a lot of these mental health conditions, we're not going to have a healthier society. It's not good enough for us to just rest on our laurels and say, well, mental health is an issue. What are we actually going to do about it? And I have a ton of respect for John Haggie here, who has spent his life in the medical community, and he does have a very good understanding of the infrastructure and the professional deficits here in Gander. But I'd also like to say that I recognize them as well, and I will fight just as hard to make sure that they're being taken care of.
We actually have a plan in the healthcare segment of the Liberal policy platform, which is out there. There are specific recommendations about youth mental wellness and not just mental illness. There are specific recommendations about youth addiction and youth treatment, and there is a plan there. I have not seen any evidence of a plan from the NDP or the Conservative Party.
Thank you, gentlemen. Next question is Rod to Lucas.
Lucas, Conservative government kept talking of its red tape reduction initiatives. However, all too often when one area had red tape removed, another area would experience new layers of red tape. Small businesses are the backbone of our area and our province. What would you do to ensure that red tape for small business is drastically reduced?
Well, the reality is small and medium-sized businesses are being crushed by the bureaucracy as it is right now. I mean, the weight of the regulations surrounding a lot of what they're able to do in order to grow and thrive has been seriously, I guess, hampered or dampened. And my answer to that, I'm not going to take my whole 2 minutes to answer that question, is that I have friends who run businesses, who own businesses. I have ran a business in Gander for over a year. I am willing to, as the MHA for the area, sit down with whoever and have a discussion about what kind of red tape they need removed in order to make sure that their endeavor is thriving.
The Chamber of Commerce here has had some really interesting meetings over the course of the year, which I have attended as a member, and they have discussed issues around very practical ways whereby some of the recommendations that appear to be red tape reduction by the Conservative government may in actual fact end up making things worse. One of them particularly, which struck me as on the face of it a very good idea, was simply the idea of combining business tax with business property tax. But once you get past that, the devil is in the detail, and it's Byzantine in its potential complexities as to who rents what properties or who owns what and who pays on whose behalf. And what seems like a very good idea to me from the outside, not having a business background, is obviously flawed. The way ahead in the Liberal policy is a consultative process, looking at business leaders as representatives of the community to advise us where the blocks are, what red tape doesn't make sense, and how it should be removed, bearing in mind there is a need for some accountability in how businesses run their business.
Thank you. We can continue with the 2-minute debate.
I will be happy to continue discussing this. And yeah, I mean, I really do agree with what you're having to say there with regards to a consultative process. That's what I've done my entire life. I have created partnerships with very interesting people and organizations, and I've done things I never imagined that I would do in my 22 years in terms of getting people on the same page and working together. And because I do have a business background, I understand finance. I understand right now that, you know, they're being crushed by the weight of regulation, and that they need some support. There needs to be someone there, like a strong MHA, like either of us, at the table to say, hey, we're on your side. Well, you know, that's actually the slogan. I said that by accident just then. But yeah, I'm on your side. We'll make sure that we can do what we can there.
Well, it's very nice that Lukas is including me in his slogans. I'm not sure whether my party leader would be terribly enamored of that, but I'll take it for what it's worth. Thank you very much. As far as small and medium business is concerned, it certainly is a powerhouse for the economy. The bottom line is that from my perspective, I can waffle until he presses the button and goes red. But the thing about it is that I need, as an MHA, to rely on constituents to tell me what their problems are, because I do not live this. I do not walk in that world and get up every morning wondering how I'm going to deal with the paperwork. So what I offer is that constituency clinic, that open door 1 day a week, the phone call, and you educate me about your problems, and I will be in a position to actually do something tangible and call you back and tell you about it.
Absolutely. I think that involves having regular town halls in the community and partnering with the municipal government.
And that's what the Liberal Party platform on open government actually says. We will have regular town halls across the province in each district.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is Darren to John.
John, the town of Gander has experienced tremendous growth over the past number of years that have put a strain on municipal infrastructure. More specifically, the wastewater treatment plant that's been discussed a number of times here tonight. The town has received funding assurance from the federal government, however, has yet been unable to obtain the same commitment from the provincial government. This coming year, the town is faced with spending $4.6 million for a temporary fix of this problem. How will you work with the town to ensure they obtain the necessary funding for the new water treatment plant and also assist other municipalities in this area with their infrastructure issues.
The only communities that seem to have got their water sorted out is Appleton and Glenwood, who had that big investment in new technology some years ago. I alluded earlier to the fact that there is federal money on hand, and you mentioned the Gander situation where the feds have already said, in a previous government has said that they will do that. The challenge is for me to be able to leapfrog to the top of the list in what will become an internal bidding situation between the districts after the election. Because everybody, I mean, if you look at the infrastructure needs in Gander, wastewater, you look at the infrastructure needs in Gambo, they haven't had a decent town hall, I think, for 5 or 6 years. They've only just got the fire hall renovated after some mitigation work was done. Benton has a similar situation. You have these infrastructure deficits. So the question is, how, as an MHA, as a representative from the inside, do you argue for your priority over other districts who will also want the money too? And the answer that I go back to is health and safety. You know, if you haven't got clean drinking water and you haven't got decent sanitation, your community is not healthy. I think, personally, that ranks right up there with any other justification, and that's the kind of argument you would hear me make come November the 30th or December the 1st in that environment, because it is going to be an internal argument between the various factions who will come to the table, be they NDP, the odd Conservative, or the rest of the Liberal Party.
Thank you, John. Lukas?
Well, to what John just talked about, you know, the infrastructure deficits, I mean, we could come up with a grocery list of items that need to be dealt with in Newfoundland and Labrador. I mean, I'm sure we're all aware of a lot of the infrastructure deficits that we're currently dealing with. And my answer to that is that what we need to do is foster partnerships, and I keep coming back to that. I'm proud to say that I know some of the town councilors on a first-name basis. I've met with them several times. I am already at their disposal, and I'm not even the MHA yet. I will do whatever I can to arm myself with the ammunition necessary to go into the House of Assembly and aggressively, if need be, ask the question, what are we doing about the water treatment facility in Gander? What are we doing about issues that the towns are facing? And I really think we need a warrior and a maverick, someone that's outside the political system, and that's what I have to offer.
Interesting that, again, you're referring to outside the system and the maverick. I did that once, and outside of healthcare got nowhere. And I think that there is an argument to be made for maybe being on the inside of some of these discussions. It is going to be a challenge when you have 268 communities with needs and wants. You have to weed out the wants and go for the needs. And then you have to say, how do you prioritize those needs? Health and safety is the way I would go. And I don't know whether anyone could rebut that sensibly. So being hopefully on the inside, I feel that that would be a far better approach and far more likely to yield dividends. The facts of the case is there isn't going to be enough money to do everything for everybody all the time. So we have to be selective to some extent. And health and safety, water and clean water, clean drinking water, and adequate sewage treatment to standard are the places to start for any community.
Yeah, absolutely. 100% right there is a lot of what we're dealing with. I mean, and there's other infrastructure deficits in the communities, like the women's centers have been defunded. I mean, they're not getting as much money as they used to be getting. And right now, women in Newfoundland and Labrador make 66 cents on the dollar in comparison to men, and I think that's a horrible stat there in itself. So really what it is it coming back to is having a partnership with the local stakeholders and arming yourself with the ammunition necessary to get done what needs to be done. And you're absolutely right, we need to set priorities. We're in a dire economic situation right now in Newfoundland and Labrador. There is a reason why Premier Paul Davis has not provided the economic forecast update yet. It's because it's not pretty, folks. We've got some serious decisions that we've got to make, and that's going to have a lot to do with what we can do municipally in terms of provincial funding. But I'm willing to meet with whoever and make sure that we get done what we can get done.
The Liberal Party actually has a cohesive plan
Thank you,
for
gentlemen.
dealing with this.
The next question is Gina to Lukas.
Lukas, home invasions are on the increase in this area, and residents are becoming fearful and feel there's a need for increased police presence. What do you see as your role as MHA to address this issue?
Well, policing primarily has been a municipal issue, and I mean, we've got the great work that's been done by the town police, and I see Oz Fudge here in the audience here tonight, and we've also had the great work done by our RCMP people that have worked in the community for such a long time. Home invasions are on the rise. It's a very big concern of mine. I go to bed every night and make sure the car is locked. I'll double and triple check, and I do the same thing at the house. It's pretty sad that Gander, not so long ago, was one of the top 10 places in the country to live in terms of, the crime rate, access to services, and now we're in a situation where almost every other day it seems like someone's house has been broken into. Like, your house might have been into yet, I don't know, mine hasn't been.
Cheerful.
But it's a big concern, and my role in that I see is the same thing that I answer to a lot of the other questions is, I'm willing to meet with the town police and leverage any kind of funding that we need to make sure that if they need to hire extra staff, and work with the RCMP and other stakeholders to make sure that we're moving forward with an aggressive plan to deal with this.
Policing off the Avalon has been much more patchwork. There is a big debate at the moment, I gather, between the RCMP and the RNC as to who should have jurisdiction where. And I think that is where a provincial influence could come. But it is essentially a municipal issue. The question one might want to ask is, if you took one step back, is what's driving this increase in crime? And I think two things stand out to me. One is the topic on mental health and addictions, which we've spoken to before. And I think if you look at the crime statistics in this province, that seems to be where a lot of the driver is coming from. We don't have, as we've heard before, an adequate mental health strategy for the province. And that may be well driving some of these issues. But the facts of the case are that somehow the municipalities have to be enabled to make the place safe, because that's the next thing after clean water and sewage disposal, is are you safe?
And that leads us right into our debate.
Thank you.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. All right. I mean, why, with all the, my train of thought has gone. My train of thought has gone completely.
Well, I'll jump in there.
Yeah.
So a big concern of ours is, I think that was very important what he brought up just then actually, is that we need to start dealing with the root causes of a lot of this. And I think the work that the all-party committee is doing on mental health, traveling around the province, and and basically assessing the needs in the areas, is going to go a long way to mitigating and dealing with a lot of this. In a lot of cases, we're seeing this low, this petty crime, for lack of a better term, is coming from youth in the area that haven't been properly supported by programs that are necessary to make sure that we're providing the kind of education and care that our community is known for. We've got the Community Youth Network. I mean, they've been doing some wonderful, wonderful work. I went up there and I met with them. Leslie's a lovely woman, and she's also very concerned about the crime that we've been seeing in the area. And I think it comes back to making sure that the community is a conducive place where we all can exist together, and
We, the Liberal Party, have clearly laid out a mental wellness and mental health strategy for youth. It's part of a coherent, cohesive platform. We have seen nothing of the like from the NDP in terms of a cohesive, coherent platform, and the Provincial Progressive Conservatives have just released their blue book, which they've now called a blueprint, which is essentially a recycling of all the budget commitments they made for the last 2 years, with another $45 million tacked on. So I think really it's all right talking in generalities, and there are some wonderful people dedicating themselves to try and help youth with mental illness, but you need to put it in a systematized, systematic, funded, thought-through approach based on evidence of outcomes that are positive.
Thank you, gentlemen. We're now proceeding to 4 questions from the audience. I remind you, you have 1 minute to ask your question. The first question is from Sandra McKellar.
Good night. It's a fairly simple question, but I think really important, particularly as we're going into the election, because history has shown that when governments experience budgetary constraints, that one of the first areas to have funding cuts is social programs. And I think it's been alluded to on and off tonight. So what would you do to ensure that funding of these valuable programs are not adversely affected or reduced?
And who's that directed to?
I actually would like a response from
both of
John.
us?
And
From me?
because,
Okay.
yes.
Yeah, that's a good question, and you're quite right. Different governments react in different ways. Historically, budget cuts tend to manifest themselves in reducing the number of salaries they have to pay. As an example, I will draw on the healthcare sector. The bottom line in healthcare is that of the vast amounts of money we spend, anywhere from 25 to 30 cents on every dollar is wasted. Okay? You don't need to cut a budget to see a huge increase, potentially, in available money to deal with a lot of the issues that we've talked about tonight. Over the course of a year, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars. Those efficiencies, that waste, has to be dealt with by management that is able and willing to take on innovation and not risk averse. The biggest obstacle, in my view, in healthcare to accessing that 25 cents on every dollar is intransigence and a culture of fear and risk aversion that has percolated the healthcare system over the last 10 years, certainly since the last reorganization. It's become endemic and almost bred into the system, but was there to a large extent before. And that's not confined to any one sector. It's a culture that comes, I think, from top and middle down. It's also not particular any one group within that. There are areas where physicians have to stand up and lead in terms of eliminating some of these practices. 30% of all radiological imaging done in hospitals is unnecessary and will not contribute to a patient's well-being or positive outcome. They need to deal with that.
Thank you, John. Lucas?
Sandra, I believe you're the executive director of the Women's Center here in Gander, is that correct? Yes, and I just want to thank you for the work that you do. You know, you guys are no stranger to making a little bit of money go a long way. You guys are very, very good at that. Very impressed with the work that you guys do. The NDP has said that we need to increase the funding and make sure that there's stable funding coming into women's centers across the province. That is one of the policies that have been announced as something that we're very, very interested in doing because it's so important. The economic situation that Newfoundland and Labrador is in, there are no money left in the provincial coffers. So we need to start having a discussion about how we're going to maintain the delivery of the services that we have here in the community and in the province. And to be honest, that we're probably going to have to borrow some money instead of slashing and burning. I don't think that's going to be any answer at all.
Thank you, Lucas. We have 2 minutes for an open conversation.
I mean, stable funding, I think, is a perfectly reasonable thing for any organization to expect. I have no issue with that at all, and in actual fact, that too is in the Liberal platform. It's institutionalized, it's built in. What I would say in return for that, though, is it has to be based on outcomes that are what the original program was set up to do. And I'm sure in the case of that particular program, that can be demonstrated quite easily. But I think due diligence requires that the money be spent on things that we know work, and if that's the case, then the funding should be stable over years. And it's not just social programs. I mean, I was at the Appleton Council earlier this week. They have a problem with stable multi-year funding. There's a lot of organizations that I think rely on government money who have a reason to expect that. But it's got to be based on what you're doing, and that, whatever outcome it is, as how we agree to measure it, has to be delivered. Because programs that don't deliver are not only a waste of money, they're an opportunity cost for another program that's crying out for money that could use it and produce a positive outcome.
Realistically, there has been no long-term planning done for Newfoundland and Labrador's economy. I speak to people that work in not-for-profit on a regular basis, and they say year over year, when budget time comes in March and April, they don't know if they're going to have to lay off staff, if they'll be able to continue doing the work that they're doing. I'm well aware that we don't have an unlimited amount of money that we can put around, but John's correct. We do need to make sure that any money we're investing is based on performance-based, that we're giving money to programs that produce results, and the Women's Center would definitely be one of those.
So why, Lukas, has your leader announced $10 million for a plan that doesn't work properly, the NLPDP? Simply
Thank you,
throwing money
gentlemen.
at a problem is no answer.
Thank you. The next question is from Craig Hall.
Yes, my question is directed to both candidates. Mr. Norman first, and then Dr. Haggie. Many people think that after years of an adversarial relationship with the federal government, the time is now right to foster a more collaborative approach between both levels of government. What is your view with respect to working with other levels of government, including municipal government?
Thanks so much for the question. I think this is something that we've touched on a little bit, and I'm so glad that you got to ask it, because we just had a federal election where we saw a much needed change in government, according to many of you here, as we just elected 32 out of the 32 seats to the governing party in Atlantic Canada. I believe personally, maybe I'm too optimistic, but I believe governments are well-intentioned from the get-go, but once they get in there, they've got some tough decisions that they have to make. And right now, there's not a single opposition member of parliament in Atlantic Canada to ask questions to government when things aren't being dealt with. It's a very top-down environment. I have been around in terms of politics, and I've worked with members of parliament. I know the kind of pressures that parties put on them, and sometimes you need to be in opposition to make the noise that needs to be made in order to address concerns. That's why I really think it'll be beneficial if we can elect some opposition MHAs of either party, quite frankly, into the legislature, because there is a Democratic deficit there right now. If the polls are to be believed, and we cruise for a landslide majority where potentially all 40 seats could turn the one color, I just think that's not conducive to democracy, and it's not good politics.
I think there's a huge opportunity here. Traditionally, though, I think you have to be wary that not always has a federal provincial government necessarily got on well with a federal liberal, for example, federal government. So I think the opportunity comes from the fact that we have a group of MPs in this province who have contributed to and worked very well with a larger pool of provincial Liberal candidates. And similarly, we have worked on each other's campaigns. We know each other well. In Scott Sims' case, we go back a long way. That gives us an entree. It's easier to speak to people who, at first glance, you know and have some friendly intentions. But at some point, you may have to stand your ground and say, well, this federally might be the right thing to do, but certainly isn't provincially. We've seen how badly the federal Conservative treated this province when they had the chance to help it.
Thank you, John. We now have a 2-minute open debate.
Okay, well, just to continue on to that topic, clearly, him and Scott Sims have a wonderful rapport because, they're members of the same party in a lot of ways. But I'd also like to say I have a wonderful rapport with Scott Sims. I've sat down with him many times, and we also go back a long way. And I'm willing to sit down and have a discussion with him or any other member of Parliament for Newfoundland and Labrador, especially our Cabinet Minister, Judy Foote, and have a discussion about ensuring that the needs of this province are being met. Sometimes, yes, dialogue is very important. You get in there and you can have a discussion, a friendly discussion. But sometimes, as we know in the case of Danny Williams, you've got to shake your fist a few times before you get some results, like the Atlantic Accord. And I guess my response to that is, as you should probably know by the way that I've performed in this debate, I'm willing and ready to fight when necessary, and I'm willing to sit back and agree and have a discussion as well.
I think the other level of government that wasn't specifically mentioned, there are 3 tiers of government constitutionally in this country. There is the municipal level as well. And by and large, they have tended to be a non-partisan group instead of, by which I mean not affiliated with any particular party. I think some of the hardest discussions that are going to take place in the coming little while are actually those between the provincial government and the municipal government. And I think that the way to deal with that is in an open and a transparent way, and also to maybe undo some of the history that has existed between some MHAs and some councils.
Well, and it's so important to have boots on the ground representation. I mean, I had the privilege multiple times over the last few years to sit down on the council meetings and listen to what they were discussing. And they thanked me every single time for being there, because what they're doing is so important to the area. And what I hope to do will also be important for the area, and we can work together on solutions.
They're
Thank you,
actually
gentlemen.
pleased to see somebody from a provincial level who might be interested in their activities.
Our next audience question is from Bonnie Pritchett.
Okay, bad start. Healthcare, in poll after poll, is one of the 3 top concerns of the people of this province. Long waits, hospital beds being used by people waiting for long-term care beds, inadequate and aging nursing homes, delays in diagnostic testing, and the list goes on. Some propose privatization as a solution. Dr. Haggie, what ideas and possible solutions would you bring to the table to address these concerns? And Mr. Norman, how would you and your party approach this issue? Dr. Haggie, please.
Thank you for the question. It's a top-of-mind issue on the doorstep as well. If you were to take a time out and just put everything in suspended animation, you could sit back and analyze the problem and say, well, how do we stop the influx of elderly into the hospital? The Liberal Party has some proposals whereby that could be achieved. We've talked about the healthy living assessments. We've talked about an increasing emphasis on community care and looking after people nearer their own home and keeping them healthy in their homes longer, identifying issues before they become issues maybe. Then you look at the issue of acute care. There is no rehabilitation unit in central Newfoundland. There's certainly not one in the Gander Hospital. For every day you put an elderly person in an acute care bed, it takes a week of rehabilitation to get them back to where they were. Once they've been in for a week, the chances of them getting back to that level are very slim. So prevention is the key as much as anything. You can't take a time out, though, because you've got this problem. There's 27 patients who need to be looked after in better and different facilities rather than an acute care bed down the road. So I think what you've got to do is to say, how do we deal with those? There is, for the foreseeable 25 years, going to be an increase in need for long-term level 3 care beds. We have a lot of level 1, probably with some vacancies. We're getting short of level 2, and then there's that awkward transition between 2 and 3. There have been no new level 3 beds in this province for way too long. That is pictured, dealt with in the Liberal Party platform, and I notice I've got less than 20 seconds to tell you about it. But essentially, it involves investing in infrastructure to make the beds available, and no, we will not be privatizing the delivery of healthcare.
Thank you, John. Lucas?
I'm so glad that we will not be privatizing the delivery of healthcare, because I just think full stop, that's a terrible idea. Once you start bringing multinational organizations in here and, remove some of the regulations and say just have at her, I just think that's a bad idea. As a public service, right now I've spoken with Earl McCurdy, I've also spoken with MHAs from other parties, candidates from other parties. One thing that I think we need to start doing as a government and as a province is start looking at home care. The longer we can keep seniors in their homes, the better off we are, the happier people are. We need to make home care a more attractive profession, because we're currently in a situation where a lot of the people that are offering home care are going to start needing home care themselves. So we need to start pulling youth in, and that goes back to the population growth strategy, keeping people in rural areas. We need to make home care at the top of our list in terms of making an attractive profession that's accessible, affordable, and one that people are truly, truly proud of. And I know that many that are already in home care are proud of what they do.
Thank you. We can continue this conversation.
And just to move slightly sideways, the delivery and funding of home care, I haven't seen any suggestion from the NDP about how they're actually going to do that. We've had a lot of kind of knee-jerk little responses to what may be hot-button issues for specific demographics, but there's been no cohesive policy of a vision. And the next thing is, how on earth do you propose to pay for that?
Well, first of all, we'll go back to, the budgetary issues that we're dealing with, and we'll stop spending $4.5 million on swimming pools in districts just before elections happen. I mean, a lot of these programs are not that expensive in terms of budgetary items that go onto the budget. It's just about setting our priorities. And as for a specific policy, in order to have home care come into people's homes, we need to make sure that seniors can still afford to pay on fixed income for where they're living. So one thing that we've come out and said is that we would invest $500,000 into portable rent subsidies to make it more affordable for people to live in their houses longer, and that would go a long way into making it more accessible for people to get home care. If they could afford their rent, they probably would be able to better afford home care as well.
The portability of a rent subsidy, though, doesn't really change the fact that if you look in this district, in Gander, the formal rental market is very small. It's a lot smaller than the experts, and again, I would have to defer to them, it's about a third of what it should be. So it's all right having a portable rent subsidy if that's actually been shown to work, but the facts of the case are, if you've nowhere to rent, that doesn't entirely solve the problem.
No, well, it's about having accessibility and affordable living situations for people in the community. It's very important for us to look at this and then really examine these, and we do need to consult with the experts to make sure any decisions that we're making are in the interest of people.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our final audience question is from Cyril Abbott.
Thank you. This question is directed to both candidates. Recreation in the Gander District is a year-round major contributor to our economy and obviously forms an important part of the social fabric of what we are as communities. The town of Gander has developed a recreation master plan which has identified various recreational needs, some more significant than others. How would you work with the town of Gander to ensure necessary funding for recreational infrastructure?
Would you like to start, Lukas?
Yeah, absolutely. As previously mentioned, Cyril, I'm really glad that you're here, actually. It's a really pleasure to have the Deputy Mayor here to ask this question. I would be willing to sit down and have a discussion about that. Recreation is so important to the community, it's not even funny. When you make proper investments in recreation, you start having a healthier community, which lessens the burden on the formal healthcare system. It's so important that recreation is funded properly in our communities, and I'm really proud of the work that Kelly Sevier and the town staff have done in that area on the budget that they have had, and I would continue to work with them in a way that they would have an open dialogue with the MHA and say, well, these are challenges that we're facing. What can you do to help us with that?
The plan from a Liberal perspective speaks to that in several ways. One of the things that struck everybody who is concerned with obesity, for example, is how it's starting as a problem at the very young. If you have recreational facilities that are available to young children, and not just through school, you can encourage a healthy lifestyle, and we can start to see some of the changes that we need to in the chronic health conditions here. It is important. It is a feature of life that makes a community into a community. And again, I would suggest that the ways to do that is for you as a mayor or a representative of a municipality to approach your MHA and say, these are the specific plans that we have. And then there'll become that dialogue of what the wants are, what the needs are, and where the funds are. And that's the negotiation that will rely on detail and context. And other than that, you can't be too much more specific.
Thank you. We now have 2 minutes to debate.
One of the first things I'll do as the MHA for Gander is sit down and have a meeting with Deputy Mayor Cyril Abbott, if he would agree to that, which I'm sure he'd be very open to, and have a discussion about where we are right now fiscally as a municipality in this region, and what we can do to further improve the situation. Recreation is so important. Growing up in Gander, I'm well aware of what the facilities in the area have provided me with, the opportunities that I have been provided with, as a young adult. I've spent a number of hours at the skate park down around Calvis Pond, and also involved with the community programs like, the basketball program. I was in that. I was involved with the soccer program. It's very near and dear to my heart, and I think recreation is the key in a lot of ways to the future of the region. We have more people moving, they're happier, they're healthier. Exercise gives you endorphins, endorphins make you happy. And then with that kind of optimism, we'll be able to challenge a lot of the things that approach a lot of the challenges we're facing and come together with some solutions.
I think there's a sector here we're missing out on, which is the interested groups and private individuals. One of the treasures of this town is Cobb's Pond and the Rotary and the work they have done in partnership with provincial and municipal governments. And that's an example. There is the tennis and squash club, which are well advanced with plans for a building of their own. There's the gymnastics, who have begun to fundraise for a new gymnasium. And these are all initiatives that have come from outside of the traditional council, elected representatives, these kind of things. And I think these need to be encouraged and nurtured as well. And again, an open door, constituency clinic, that kind of thing would be a place where those could start, and then the discussions would need to come around who needed to be at the table and what it was that the municipalities or these organizations felt that the province could provide them.
Thank you, John. We'll now go back to the panelists to complete their questions, starting with Rod to John.
John, over the past 10 years, we've seen many financial decisions made by provincial governments that have had a major impact on rural Newfoundland. One example we've mentioned here this evening was the relocation of the school board headquarters. What would you do to ensure that government is more fiscally responsible when making decisions that have such a dramatic financial impact?
Well, I think it goes back to part of the comment I made before about geographical impact analysis. You do a financial impact analysis, and just as an aside, the issue of the school board was done, I heard, on the basis of financial issues. But in actual fact, has ended up costing this government, and thus the taxpayers, you and I, far more than anyone ever had intended. Similarly, the amalgamation of the health boards from 14 to 4 never saved a cent. So I think you have to look firstly at whether or not that is actually going to achieve what you want, if it's a fiscal issue that's driving it. And if it is, then why does the reduction in services, because that's nearly what it always amounts to, why does that have to land on the necks of this district or the communities in Gander or Glenwood or Benton or wherever it might happen to affect most? And I really think that a geographical impact analysis, that kind of approach, would be something that even if it wasn't official government policy, as a member of caucus, I would make sure they never got away from hearing when those decisions were being made. Because at the end of the day, I don't work, or the MHA will not work for the government. He won't work for Earl McCurdy and the opposition. He works for you guys. And that needs to be front and center, the mantra. Because these fiscal decisions, a lot of them, actually don't make fiscal sense when you look at it and have been done on a biased arrangement whereby things have gravitated towards the Avalon.
Thank you, John. Lukas?
Well, on the topic of the school board amalgamation, once again, because it's a very good example, it's an example that we had mentioned earlier. We're in a situation right now where we have the school board was taken out of Gander and centralized in St. John's as a cost-saving measure. when we're still, well, the school board, I guess, is still paying rent on Atlantic Place in downtown St. John's. They went over $1 million over budget throughout this whole process. And then the economic spin-offs of removing it from Gander are so far-reaching. It's like it's not a good thing at all. And as mentioned also by John, it was done under the previous administration. But you know what else about the previous administration was happening? It was a landslide majority where there was not enough members in opposition to make sure questions were being asked of the government members. Our MHA of the day didn't stand up to Kathy Dunderdale and say, this is something that's going to negatively impact the community. You know, I have grave concerns about that, and that's why my name is forward. I really want to be a strong, mavericky voice in there to make sure that we're dealing with these.
Thank you, Lukas. We have 2 minutes to debate.
The difference between then and the possible future is the team of leaders concept that Dwight Ball has got. It isn't a group of yes men and women that he has attracted to his team. It's a group of people who have experience and breadth and depth in a whole variety of complementary fields. There are lawyers, there are entrepreneurs, there are business people, there are women's activists, there are physicians. And none of that group is going to play the role of patsy in the way that the previous Conservative administration encouraged. The first people to speak out against Danny Williams ended up out of a job. There was one health minister who I think lasted a week, and that was it. So that is not going to happen with a Liberal government. So I think the whole argument about, you know, whether you're a minority government, whether you're a 3-seat opposition party or a 1-seat opposition party is kind of academic. The people in this district need to focus on what it is they want from their MHA on the 1st of December and focus very clearly on that.
You know, one thing that I'm really bothered about right now is the fact that there are only 2 of us up here. To me, that is very indicative of not only do we have a social deficit, a fiscal deficit, we have a democratic deficit. Because right now, the Tories do not have, there's 6 ridings where they don't have candidates. I would love for a PC candidate to be here and be a third voice. But to me, it's indicative of the lack of democracy being alive and well in Newfoundland and Labrador, and it's something that I vehemently oppose. I think we need to pull more people in, have more discussions, broaden the table, and make sure that everybody has a part in this process. And that goes back to the centralization of these services. If we had more people involved than other than the MHAs, because it's not just the MHAs, it's the people in their communities that are telling them what needs to be done, we would come up with solutions that are more conducive and to what people actually want.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question is from Darren to Lukas.
Lukas, how would you secure funding for a new airport terminal for here in Gander?
Waiting for that question. No, as we talked about, the airport is so important, and as John mentioned, the federal government has committed to a number of dollars for infrastructure spending. Even though the airport falls under federal jurisdiction, I don't think it's acceptable for any one elected official, whether you're a councillor, a mayor, an MHA, or an MP, to say, well, that's the other guy's job. It's about pulling people together and saying, these are issues that we're dealing with, and saying, you know, what can you guys do, what can we do to come up with ways to mitigate some of the challenges that we're facing. In terms of the airport, I've been very happy to see local businesses spend some time up there and try and create some motion, I guess, and some attraction around the airport. And as for securing funding, it was my answer for everything else. I will fight tooth and nail to make sure that if it needs to be higher on the priority list, as the people of Gander will tell me, I will make sure that we get it done.
Thank you, Lukas. John?
The bottom line is that you're looking at $13.5 million from the provincial coffers, effectively. My understanding of it is that the new terminal plans are shovel-ready, and that's what the Trudeau administration wants. Shovel-ready plans for next spring, and they will give the money. So the question then goes back to the discussion we had before around how you lever those dollars at a time when you don't know what the books are like. The bottom line is that whatever happens on the 1st of December, I suspect I will not be the Minister of Finance. That leaves me free to go to the table, hopefully from within inside the tent, as it were, and make that case very strongly. There are other options for other parts of the airport. There's been discussions around what you could do, for example, with the International Lounge, which was a marvelous venue for that gala we had last week. It's super. Call me nostalgic and old-fashioned, but I would hate to see that go. And there are possibilities about keeping that and using that to leverage money for the terminal. So
Thank you. We'll go into an open debate at this point.
And you can continue.
So the bottom line there is that I'm open to any idea that the Airport Authority CEO, Reg Wright, can throw at me, as well as the chair of the board, Des, and committed to make sure that no one can go away saying, we never knew you needed some money.
Yeah, and that's about having a boots on the ground MHA that's engaging with discussions at all times. And we talked a few questions ago about an MHA leveraging funding for different programs and stuff like that are born out of the community outside of the government jurisdiction. There's a lot an MHA can do as an individual beyond the bureaucracy. They can lend a hand by showing up at community events and hockey games and being around in the community, because an MHA has an extensive network of people they can pull on in various private and public sectors to make sure that attention is being placed where it needs to be in terms of economic development. The airport, I see, quite frankly, is one of those areas where an MHA needs to grease the wheels, as you would have said, and pull as many people in and say, what can local businesses do? What can the provincial government do? What can the federal government do? But I can't stand here in front of you, and it's something I'll never do, and tell you this is exactly what I'm going to do, because no one here can do that.
The deficit that Lukas mentioned about the political deficit, if you like, is it's actually very difficult to hold the previous government to account when it doesn't have a representative here, because a lot of the background decisions around that airport have been made and then forgotten by previous Conservative governments. I refer again to the issue of the Government Air Services hangar. The lease hasn't been signed. There was a $50 million promise for that. There's talk of renovating the other side of the airport. There's been a lot of talk and really very little in the way of action. And the sad thing here is that we and you have no way of holding the previous incumbents to account.
Thank you, gentlemen. Our next question is from Gina to John.
John, what do you see as the greatest need facing seniors in rural Newfoundland, and how would you, as MHA, address this need?
Well, that's a really interesting point, and it's very topical, because we are probably, if not the fastest aging province, the second fastest aging province. Their needs fall into, broadly, the same needs as anybody has. They have economic needs. They're on a fixed income, and they are in small communities with very limited services. They're often isolated, and one of the single biggest predictors of longevity and good health in old age is social isolation. So I think you have to bear in mind that Gander is a service area for a lot of these smaller communities. So not only does it have its own elderly population, it has an increase in elderly population. And I think a significant proportion of the new builds or the new arrivals in Gander have come from that group of people. They're attracted by a level of service which they think we've got, which we haven't. So I would go back to some of the things that we talked about earlier under the rubric of a healthy living assessment for the elderly to make sure that you identify any problems early on. That would include social elements as well. It wouldn't simply be confined to health, pure and simple. Is your housing up to standard? Do you have the means to heat your home? Because we do have some people who are challenged to do that on fixed income. You would have a seniors advocate who would look to make sure that the processes that are in place for looking after seniors are fair and being run properly. Then you would go back to look at some of the social programs around, if necessary, supported housing. There's new units being built. There's a proposal for another 75 up by the fire hall, which allow people to live on a single level with their snow clearing and their grass cut and these kind of things.
Thank
So
you, John.
there's no one magic bullet.
Lucas?
There certainly is no one magic bullet, but when it comes to rural Newfoundland and Labrador, the main challenge that I believe we are facing is population growth and retaining our youth. I have a number of friends, because that's my age group, remember, that are finishing university and post-secondary programs in the trades. I know two brothers, and they both did the lines course, and one was able to secure a job in St. John's, and the other one still hasn't been able to do that, and it's likely that he might have to move away in order to get his hours for his red seal. If we can't create the environment to provide some sense of encouragement and some confidence in youth in Newfoundland and Labrador that they do have opportunities in here, we are in serious trouble because, as mentioned, we are one of the fastest aging populations in the country. And until we start retaining some youth here in this area, we're cruising for a very tumultuous time.
And youth is an issue. It's mentioned specifically in the Liberal Party platform. It deals with the idea of educational aspects. But as you move through education, one of the things it will do is provide graduating students with a labor market analysis. And those students may be high school or they may be university. It tells you where the jobs are. When I was in medicine, you chose your specialty because it was something you liked. We, in medicine, as an example, and I use it simply for illustration, with an increasingly aging population, we now have 50% more pediatric residents graduating than we did 18 years ago, at the time when the percentage of pediatric patients in the population has for the first time dropped below 25%. At the same time, we had the same number of residents in geriatric medicine finishing as we did 18 years ago. So the balance is all wrong. There is no labor market analysis available for students at the moment, be they high school or otherwise. So they know what jobs they're going to get or be able to get. There are mega projects coming to an end in the next 2 years. There are job opportunities available by the infrastructure plan that has been put in place as part of this Liberal policy platform. There are jobs, or will be jobs, for these folk to go to, so we can keep them here. There is a huge issue here with graduates from the College of the North Atlantic, from the maintenance program for aviation. They can't get their hours. They could, because there's a facility just up the road, but for some reason, the college and the apprenticeship system and the red tape and regulations around that stops it.
Can I jump in
we
there
can
for a minute
deal with
before
that.
we... just quickly, some facts. I mean, this is not to do with the Liberal Party or the NDP or actually it's more to do with the PC Party. But in the last month alone, 2,500 people dropped out of the labor force in Newfoundland and Labrador. We lost 600 jobs in the province. 1,600 of those were in forestry, fishing, mining, quarrying, and oil and gas. A lot of those are tradespeople. It's not acceptable. We need to start figuring out how we're going to deal with this.
Thank you, gentlemen. The final panelist question is going to be from Rod to Lucas.
Lucas, you just touched on a great segue, I guess, if you would. Coming last in the questions, you kind of run out of something to ask, so I've been scouring my brain here trying to come up with something, and I think I have something. So we've spent a great deal of time tonight talking about economic and social issues, infrastructure at the airport, recreation, tourism. We haven't talked a lot about outmigration and how we can attract Newfoundlanders back to Newfoundland for jobs. And as Bill Clinton famously said in one of his election campaigns, it's the economy's stupid. So what do we do to turn our economy around, and specifically in Gander, to bring people back to Gander to work and live here?
Well, I think, as you mentioned, we talked about a lot of this over the last, hour and a half. I don't know how long we've been up here. It feels like forever. But we talked about all kinds of stuff with regards to youth retention and making sure that people are being taken care of and the community can grow and thrive. Like, as a young person, I mean, that's one of the reasons why I so, without hesitation, step forward, because I think I do have a unique perspective when it comes to keeping people here. As the MHA, I'll bring that to the table with whoever. Specifically in this area, we need to make it more attractive for people to raise their family here. We need to make it more attractive for people to get their education in here, to live here. And right now, decisions that were made, like the amalgamation of the school boards, what we saw is people in senior positions being moved down into the schools bumping teachers from their area of expertise into subjects they're not so familiar with, and then the new teachers can't even get their hours in their internship to be qualified. That doesn't restore or store a lot of confidence for young people in this province moving into that particular sector. And as I mentioned, with tradespeople, it's also a very big concern. So no, I don't have an answer to the specific how we can solve that. What I can tell you is I'm very, very worried about it, and that's why I'm on this stage.
Thank you, Lukas. John?
Maybe he read a labour market analysis looking for politicians as spaces. But the facts of the case are that if you want to lure people, for want of a better word, to an area, the thing that does it better than anything else is jobs, particularly for the young family. We have traditionally in this province pinned our hopes on very cyclical industries, traditional forestry, fishing, mining, and oil. It just so happens that they've all gone downwards at the same time, or are heading in that direction. And realistically speaking, with the mining and the oil, there is little chance of that rebound occurring within the next 2 years. There is a plan in place in the Liberal Party to enhance, maintain what we've got, and further enhance non-traditional industries, jobs, careers, for want of a better word. And combined with the labour market analysis, you don't actually have to pay Alberta wages to lure somebody from Newfoundland to stay here. You just have to give them enough so it's not worth going.
Thank you. We'll now start the 2-minute debate.
And beyond that, give them enough so it's not worth going. I want to make it an environment where people want to be here, not that it's not worth going. I want to ensure that the youth in the area feel comfortable to approach someone that's gone through a lot of what they're going through as well in the area, being born and raised here, and make sure that they have a say at the table. I'm going to be an MHA at the Confederation Building in St. John's asking questions, but it's not going to be just me asking questions. It's going to be the hundreds and the thousands of people that are bringing their concerns to me, and a lot of those are going to be young people because, that's my demographic, but a lot of them are going to be seniors and other demographics as well. So we just really, really need to look at the situation that we're in and partner with businesses, different levels of government, different programs like the Linkages program, and make sure that young people that live in this area can have confidence that they can get the education they need and the experience that they need to live here and raise their family and have kids and restore confidence in that process. Because right now, it's not there. I'm not hearing it on the doors. People are really worried. I'm supposed to be up here and being, optimistic, and I am very optimistic about the future. But we're dealing with some very, very rough times ahead, and I really think we're going to need a fighter at the table.
Again, it's the assumption that only one person up on this podium can do any fighting.
It's just what I'm offering, John.
From my point of view, there is a plan that you need, and the plan is here. Jobs will bring people here. There is a specific policy aimed at youth with mentorship, training to encourage entrepreneurs, the options to fill in gaps by making sure that the secondary education system actually delivers people who are educated to an appropriate standard to go on to further education or to enter training in the workforce. Once you've got them with the jobs, then the recreation issues, the lifestyle issues, that's what's going to keep them, not the money. Once you see what a marvelous place this is to live, you stay. Look at me, 20-odd years ago.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, Gina, Rod, and Darren. The one-on-one debate is new for our candidates forum. During this time, John and Lukas will get to ask each other a question, which they'll have 1 minute to respond, followed by 2 minutes of open debate. We'll start with John to Lukas.
I was struck when I went on the NDP website and when I looked at the press releases that essentially what seems to be out there is what I heard described as dog whistle politics. Some group has an issue and you guys have a policy for that specific group. Nowhere on there could I find anything that related to policy in terms of a cohesive or a coherent plan, a vision, if you like, for where you see the province and a roadmap for how to get there. All I got was, did I want to donate $5, $10, or $40 on the homepage?
You have
got
a
that
question?
on your website, too.
So, where's your plan?
You know, my plan, I've been presenting it now for the last hour and a half up here, and the party plan is been what it's always been. We've got boots on the ground, MHAs, in their local districts, in their communities, making sure that the needs of the people in those areas are being met and brought to the House of Assembly. We've had a number of successes as individual MHAs in the House of Assembly. George Murphy, the MHA at the time for St. John's East, secured a moratorium on fracking in the province, and I felt that that was very important because we're looking at seriously damaging the ecological natural resources that we have in the province, and I mean, for future generations, that's not restoring a lot of confidence in young people living here. The plan is, and always has been to be, to consult people in the area and make sure that what they have to bring to the table is being met. Because right now, I feel like a lot of the constituents in the districts around the province have felt like their concerns have been falling on deaf ears. And that's why Jerry Rogers started going around and saying, I'm listening.
Thank you, Lukas. We have 2 minutes to debate.
It's not a plan, Lucas. I don't wish to appear to be beating you up, but I mean, it's piecemeal. You don't have candidates in every district yet. You've not got a...
We do have 40 candidates in place, actually. It's the PCs that only have 36.
Well, I know they don't. If I misspoke, I apologize. But you certainly don't have a plan that fits in a coherent or a cohesive way to address the problems. You don't have a statement that you can deliver to say, this is where we want to be in 5 years' time or at the end of our mandate or whatever it is. You don't even campaign on the basis you're going to get a mandate.
Well, you know what, John? I also have spent some time going over the Liberal policies, and I haven't seen much of a plan there either. Their plan is literally to make plans, whereas, you know, there's nothing else there. Very concerning of mine. David Cochran posted a column on it. He's also posted a column on how a landslide majority is not going to be good for this region. You know, very, very concerned about it. And the reality is, we're all doing our best up here, and I'm going to do my best for the people of the riding. That's the plan.
There is a plan. And, you know, David Cochran can say what he wants. That's his opinion. The facts of the case are that there is a lot of detail that's missing. And the bottom line you hit on earlier on, we don't know just how bad things really are. We haven't had a fiscal update. The last we heard, we were $1 billion in the hole. This is a vision for where we're going to be in 4 years' time, with a government that's responsive and open, with an economy that has been strengthened by these maneuvers. How long it takes us to get there and how effective that plan will be, you're going to have to wait and see, because effectively these are steps towards where we want to go. The detail of whether you take 2 steps that way and 1 that way can only come when this current regime unlocks the books and its successors actually get to see how good or how bad things are and where the potential immediately lies. We got a plan.
Thank you. Lukas, to John.
Well, to be perfectly honest with all of you, the question that I was going to ask John about was the centralization of services and what his opinion was on the school board. But instead, I'm going to ask about the commitment for the Waterford Hospital and St. John's mental health service delivery. For years now, the Corner Brook Hospital has promised that they're going to get a new development in there, and you guys are also on board with that as well. Where does that fall in line with the Waterford? Is the Waterford a higher priority, or is it going to be the hospital getting finished in Corner Brook?
The Waterford Hospital was built in 1855. The Crimean War was still raging at the time, or it only just finished. Florence Nightingale was a nurse in those days. The bottom line is that there is a commitment for the Waterford in terms of specifics and timelines, simply because that was seen, because of the mental health crisis in this province, as a slightly higher priority. The issues around the Corner Brook Hospital are clouded by the fact that the current government and the health board out there have not presented or given us any clear clue of what it is they want to build. It's not even got past the stage of people who use the place actually saying, well, this is how this OR should be laid out, this is how this mental health unit should be laid out, or the cancer center, or whichever piece it is. So we don't have that on hand. We have a plan to have a speedy, shovel-ready Waterford Hospital starting in 2017.
Thank you, John. We'll start a 2-minute debate.
Thank you.
And John, in all fairness to you as an individual, I mean, what we're looking at right now is this is a decision that's going to be made by the government. We've seen the previous government, we've seen governments across the country promise things with the timeline, with costed, and then we start running into roadblocks like oil being at $40 a barrel. So when we say, yeah, we're going to do this by such and such a date, frankly, I don't believe it. I think that we're going to run into some more challenges ahead, and the question really is about setting priorities. I agree that the Waterford is an institution that needs to be replaced, but it just goes to my point that it's so important that we just don't go in there and say, yeah, here, Liberal Party, here's the keys to the Department of Finance, have at or buys. I don't agree with that. I think we need some opposition in there, and we need to make sure that the questions are being asked.
But your party is proposing to spend 10 million, which is a nice round number. It's not 9.5 or 11.1. It's a nice kind of round, comfy number on a drug plan that is inefficient, ineffective, and poorly managed to start off with. So, you know, where's that coming from?
Well, I think
you
the
want
point
to,
with
you
the
want to
drug
buy every
program, John,
diabetic an
is
insulin
that
pump,
right
which is
now,
great, but where's it
there are
coming
over
from?
90,000 seniors in Newfoundland and Labrador that do not have pharmaceutical coverage. I don't think it's good enough to be doing good. We need to be doing great. 45% of seniors in the province, that's how many percent, that's what the percentage of seniors is in Newfoundland and Labrador that have access to proper pharmaceutical care. That's not good enough. Yeah, $10 million is a nice round number, but at least we're saying, yeah, this is something that needs to be addressed.
I'm not saying it doesn't need to be addressed. In actual fact, I know it needs to be addressed, but throwing money at that problem is throwing good money after bad. The whole plan needs to be revamped from scratch and then financed properly. And you do that by getting involved
we're
with
going to
the
have
feds and
plans
pharmacare.
coming out the yin-yang from you guys without any results. I mean, literally, your planks have been plans. Every political column and commentator has said, yes, the Liberal Party is going to plan to make a plan about this. You know, it's nice to say, yeah, the platform's costed and everything like that. I haven't seen it.
Thank you, gentlemen.
You will.
We'll now move into the closing remarks of the candidates, starting in reverse order of the opening remarks. They'll each have 2 minutes to complete their comments. And we'll start with Lukas.
Okay, well, once again, I really want to thank John for sharing the stage with me. I have a ton of respect for him. I think it's so healthy that we can have a back and forth debate about the direction that the province is going. It's so important. I want to engage more people in this process, and I think we've done that. I mean, you can see that my campaign team pulls in people from all kinds of different demographics. That is so important because only by working together, we're going to come up with some solutions. And, you know, realistically, politics to me, as a young person with, you know, optimism in his eyes, is about how we choose to live together. So, you know, we can go back and forth about statistics and what we want to do for people, but until we, you know, really inject some energy and enthusiasm in the House of Assembly, because it's sure lacking right now, and I don't think it's going to get any better after November 30th, if what I've seen in the news is any indication. We need opposition members, as I've already mentioned. I am willing to stand up and fight tooth and nail, whatever it takes. I have the vigor and the energy, and you know what? No one can say that I don't care. I care so much about Gander and the area. I care about Gamble, Appleton, Benton, and Glenwood. I was born and raised here. It means everything to me. That's why I moved back here a year ago to engage in this process. I want more people to be involved. We have an opportunity here to elect the first opposition MHA for Gander, and you know what? The rest of the province knows very well about Gander. They know a lot about Gander because we always stand up and fight when necessary, and I'm going to do that as the MHA for the area. And you know what? Gander and area, it's been our home. It's carried us, and in many cases, it's nurtured us. And do you know what? Right now, it needs one of us, and that's why I've stepped forward without hesitation to offer my name up so that I could become the next MHA for Gander and provide the best representation we've ever seen. I hope that throughout this debate and throughout the next few days, I can convince you that I'm the guy that you want in the House of Assembly, and I humbly ask you to mark an X next to my name on November 30th.
Thank you, Lukas. John?
Once again, thank you for the Chamber for hosting the evening, and to everyone watching for making the effort to spend their supper time with us. In 12 days, the people of this Gander District will have a decision to make that will impact the future of this region for years to come. A stronger tomorrow means a government that offers stronger leadership and better management. It means a government that's focused on building a stronger, smarter economy, a government that's focused on wellness, health, and healthcare services. It's focused on supporting safe and sustainable communities. It's focused on investing in our future through education. And it's focused on restoring openness, transparency, and accountability to government. Our 5-point plan we've talked about tonight will stack up against any other parties with a clear direction as for road ahead. A new Liberal government will share information instead of hiding it. Our government is going to take time for people instead of shutting them out. We're looking for a culture of service instead of a culture of regulation. A new Liberal government will be there for the people, and it'll be a government you can trust. You've heard a lot of promises on how the next government should perform, and I've told you of the multiple policies within the Liberal platform and our plan to take clear, decisive action after Election Day. This election, though, is not about me selling myself to you. It's not about the Liberal Party or any other party or individual candidate. It's about you and making sure your concerns are not only heard, but acted upon. That's why I've spent many days and nights meeting with so many of you and listening. This place means a lot to me. I raised my family here. I have lived and worked here almost as long as Lukas. I buried my wife here. This is why our Liberal plan resonates with so many people across the province. It was built with your input, and it's going to be implemented with your input and ongoing support. It's time to move beyond these challenges that we face today, and it's time where we can actually move towards a stronger tomorrow, and this is something that we need now more than ever. So thank you very much for your time, and I look forward to your support on November the 30th. Thank you.
Thank you, John. I trust you found the evening to be interesting and informative. At this time, I'd like to offer our sincere thank you to the candidates and wish you well on your campaign. Our panelists, Gina Brown, Rod French, Darren Murray, for a great job. Our timekeeper, Kevin Higgins, for keeping the candidates and me in check and on time. Brian Dove and the staff of the Arts and Culture Center. The Board of Directors and the staff of the Chamber for their assistance with this evening. And last but not least, Roger Robinson and his Rogers TV crew for another great job and partnering with the Chamber on yet another successful political forum. Last but not least, I encourage everyone to get out and vote, whether it be to the polling stations on November 30th or take advantage of the advanced polls on the Fraser Road United Church Hall in Gander and the Smallwood Interpretation Center in Gambo on November the 23rd, 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Thank you so much, Debbie, and thank you to the Gander and Erie Chamber of Commerce. There has been 3 political forums and debates over the last couple of months that's taken a great deal of organization and effort, and a definite congratulations to the Gander and Erie Chamber of Commerce for the effort that they did so that this kind of venue is available to the public. Thank you to the candidates. It takes a great deal of courage to seek representation and to place yourself in a situation like this where you're open to debate. So congratulations on a very successful evening and best of luck to both of you. I would like to thank our audience at home. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you to everybody here in attendance at the Gander Smallwood Arts and Culture Center. Thank you to the staff of the Arts and Culture Center for their hard work in making this happen, and also to my panelists, fellow panelists, and last but not least, the volunteers with Rogers TV who make this possible, the hours that's invested behind the cameras and in the control mobile unit, station manager Roger Robinson. This is all done on their free time, so thank you for doing that. I would like to let all of our viewers know that Rogers TV will be providing live cross-island coverage of the provincial election on November the 30th. It begins at 8 o'clock, so make sure you're watching for that. And everybody, please get out and vote and make your voice heard. Thanks so much for catching us.